Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating source that completely flips the script on how we think about commitment, trust, and affairs. We are going to break down this incredible perspective that argues infidelity actually doesn't start in the bedroom. Nope. In fact, it starts years earlier, literally long before a ring is even on a finger, and it's rooted in our everyday, seemingly harmless habits. I am so thrilled to walk you through this material because it really changes the lens on how we view relationships. Okay, let's dive right into this. Where does infidelity actually begin? It's a heavy question, right? There's this super common misconception that affairs just kind of happen suddenly, like it's just a spontaneous moment of weakness out of nowhere. But the source material we're unpacking today shatters that idea entirely. It suggests that the foundation for cheating is actually laid out in plain sight through tiny, microscopic decisions we make every day.
To put this into perspective, the speaker shares data from extensive counseling experience, specifically working with men who've had affairs. And get this, a staggering 60 to 70% of early-stage affairs begin with something way more subtle than physical intimacy. Actually, they start simply with crossed emotional boundaries. It's all about giving off a vibe of partial belonging to someone else. It's not about jumping into bed at all. It's about sharing a piece of your emotional space that should absolutely be reserved for your partner. So, to understand exactly how this pathway works, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The root of emotional infidelity. 2. Digital traps and validation. 3. Boundaries in the single season. 4. Discipline and molecular integrity. And 5. Consecration secures future marriages. Let's get right to the first stop. Section 1. The root of emotional infidelity and habits formed early.
The source makes this compelling argument that fidelity is really a habit you form way before marriage, and it's rooted in this fascinating core concept the speaker calls molecular integrity. Basically, it means gathering all of yourself completely to belong to just one person, rather than fragmenting your attention and your affection across a whole crowd. It's the idea of possessing your entire soul and keeping all your emotional parts together. So this means saving those intimate late-night conversations or special pet names like honey or baby for just one person. It's about being entirely whole and present, not scattered all over the place.
Which brings us to Section 2, digital traps and seeking validation.
When someone lacks this molecular integrity, especially during their single years, they start to develop this dangerous appetite. And in today's world, our phones are literally the primary feeding ground for this. Modern tech is a huge accelerator here. We're talking about feeding a deep need to be adored and constantly validated. The source points out specific digital traps we fall into, like keeping multiple DMs and WhatsApp chats going, or leading people on just to monitor their responses. It's like checking a thermometer just to see how much someone is leaning into you. The speaker even notes a highly specific, kind of wild example of this lack of spiritual discipline. Individuals acting as prophetic merchants, basically calling dozens of people a day to give spiritual insights, when in reality, they're just seeking emotional access to fund their own insecurities and feel important. The source actually injects some really relatable humor right here. They say, look, if you are going through a tough season or you're just stressed and really need a laugh, go on YouTube. Seriously, watch a comedian. Do not use a vulnerable period or a bad day at work as an excuse to seek out inappropriate emotional intimacy or blur the lines with someone in your DMs. The message is super simple. Find healthy outlets for your emotions that don't involve stringing other people along. Moving right along to Section 3, boundaries in the single season and physical liberties. If those digital habits and validation-seeking behaviors go unchecked, the source argues they will inevitably spill over into physical boundary violations in the real world. The speaker heavily emphasizes preserving the sanctity of your single season by recognizing the stark difference between healthy interactions and unsafe liberties. Healthy interactions, those are your standard handshakes, maintaining firm boundaries, and just conducting yourself gracefully. Unsafe liberties, on the other hand, include things like frequent, overly tight frontal hugs, casually touching waists, or making yourself so inappropriately at home that you're literally sitting on someone else's bed. These seemingly small physical liberties totally expand that dangerous appetite for multiplicity we just talked about. Okay, Section 4, discipline, molecular integrity, and self-restraint. So, how do we actually curb this appetite for validation? Well, the solution offered relies heavily on internal boundaries. I absolutely love the concept they use here. The speaker introduces a beautiful linguistic anchor from the Yoruba language, Ijanu. It literally translates to the bit used to restrain a horse, but in this relational context, it's a personal, spiritual discipline applied to yourself.
The absolutely crucial point here is that true boundary lines are drawn voluntarily from within. You aren't doing it because there's some external rulebook or because a partner is forcing you to behave. It's a private consecration. You place the restraint on yourself to protect your own integrity, regardless of who is or isn't watching.
And finally, Section 5, consecration secures future marriages. Let's see how all these single-season habits directly dictate the survival or the failure of a future marriage. It's really a step-by-step domino effect. First, you cultivate an appetite for multiple emotional connections while you're single. Then, you get married. But guess what? There's no magic change in your habits. You don't suddenly become perfectly boundary just because you said, I do. Eventually, you hit inevitable marital stress, an argument, a really bad week, whatever. And because you've built a lifelong habit of looking elsewhere for validation, you immediately seek out alternative emotional sources. The speaker calls this cultivating a plan B, C, D, and E network of emotional support. To illustrate just how subtly this trap springs, the source shares this incredibly real anecdote. Picture a stressed husband who goes to hang out with a female friend to pour his heart out about his marital problems. He's super vulnerable, and the friend can read it. She leans closer, puts a comforting hand on his shoulder, and suddenly calls him baby. The man is left stunned, just thinking, wait, how did I, a 48-year-old grown man, just become baby? The boundary was completely crossed simply because he opened the door by seeking external emotional comfort, instead of practicing that molecular integrity and handling his stress at home. And this leads us to a really hard, actionable truth. Practicing true fidelity will offend people. Honestly, the speaker says you just have to be willing to block them anyway. True faithfulness requires absolute forthrightness. If you're enforcing your boundaries, saying no to those unsafe liberties, cutting off flirty DMs, or refusing to be someone's emotional crutch, you are absolutely going to step on some toes. People might think you're acting too strict or unfriendly or maybe just old school, but preserving your own molecular integrity is worth infinitely more than their temporary approval. So I want to leave you with this final provocative question. Who are you currently keeping around as an emotional plan B? Seriously, take a moment to evaluate your own digital habits, your friendships, and your boundaries today. The small, seemingly harmless actions you take right now are actively building the foundation of your future commitments. Protecting your integrity isn't about just avoiding a sudden bedroom affair tomorrow. It's about closing those DMs, limiting emotional reliance on others, and leaning into the discipline to set those boundaries right now. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. I really hope this provided you with a completely new framework for understanding loyalty. We'll see you next time.